Welcome to my review for Quatermass 2, which apparently was the first ever movie to have a number 2 after it. Of course, these days film studios seem to be moving away from using numbers with their sequels. Just this summer, with the more modern horror films, we've had Escape Room 2 become Escape Room Tournament of Champions very late in production. We've had The Conjuring 3 become The Conjuring, The Devil May Be Do It, and there are countless other examples. But as a child who grew up in the 80s and 90s, it always seemed like the video store was full of numbers and Roman numerals all over the shelves. That seems to be dying out now. But to the film that started it all, Quatermass 2, I salute you. I would certainly be very curious to know what the first film to have a 3 after it was, what the first film to have a 4 after it was. I'm guessing there's a good chance that Jason 10 was the first movie to have a 10 after it. It might as well go into the film records for something. So if you're with me for my review of the first film, you'll know that I really enjoyed that. I was very much looking forward to watching the sequel. There was some good continuity with this one because it was the same director, Val Guest. Brian Donlevy was back to play Quatermass, and it was only filmed a couple of years after the first one, I think. I was very curious to see if they would follow up on the ending of the first film, where Quatermass sent more rockets back into space, seemingly, even though he knew full well the dangers of doing that. But no, he has not carried on with that at the beginning of Quatermass 2. He seems to have turned his attentions away from outer space to more local space. When we pick things up, he's working in a government-sponsored lab. He's got about 5 or 6 employees, and he's working on plans to colonise the moon. And while he's doing this, his lab equipment picks up on some falling objects somewhere in the UK. They're like these little rocks that come down, and when humans get close to them, they sort of crack open a little bit, spray that human with some kind of mist, which then makes them mind-controlled. By what, we don't find out until later in the film, but I'm not really going to hold back on the spoilers today. This is a very old movie, so yeah, it does turn out to be an alien. So like in the first movie, we get a little bit of a detective plot throughout most of it, and then at the end, a big alien is revealed. This time around, it is an absolutely massive thing, which is hiding out in some kind of government base with all of its mind-controlled humans in it. So I'll say at this point that I enjoyed this film just as much as the first one. I did not expect that. I think the ace up the sleeve of Quatermass 2 is the makeshift base where the alien resides. They managed to get an actual oil refinery to use as their shooting location. It was apparently a real place in Essex. It's no longer there if you were thinking of visiting it, which you probably weren't, but this place looks terrific. The minute I saw it in this film from a distance, I thought to myself, oh, please go down there and use that place. And they did for like a good deal of the movie. And it's not like they had permission to just kind of film around the edges and there was restricted access. It seems to me from watching this that they had the total run of the place. I don't know if it had just been recently abandoned before filming or something, but it looks terrific. Quatermass just going around this place, trying to foil this nefarious alien plot. The story is a little bit derivative, but then again, back in '58, maybe this was quite an original script. It did remind me a little bit of Alien, you know, the idea of somebody getting too close to an egg-shaped object and then they'll get burned, so to speak, by their own curiosity. But Quatermass 2 obviously came out a long time before Alien. You'd have to tell me if there were any films that came out before this which bear any resemblance to this plot, but I think the reveals go at a nice pace. There was no point during this movie where I had everything figured out. I think you find certain things out at a good speed. Quatermass makes quite a few alliances during this film that I did not expect as well, so it kept me guessing, and it was good to have Brian Donlevy back as Quatermass. He wasn't one of my favourite things about the first film, even though I really enjoyed that film. He was a little bit dour for my tastes, but the fact that he's come back, it made me like him more this time around. Just that familiar actor, you know, and the alien is absolutely amazing this time around as well. At the end of the first film, we had this reveal of an actual alien that had completely lost all of its human characteristics that it had up to the movie at that point, and we saw it in the rafters of Westminster Abbey This time around we get the reveal of another alien, except there's three of the same type in the oil refinery. But what they've done with the creature this time, they've made it bigger, more impressive. It looks kind of like a really large Christmas pudding that's just distorted somehow, but it looks terrific. Gross, but terrific. The moment when Quatermass looks through this little window in a control room and sees it for the first time, it's like, whoa, it's actually quite a creepy moment. And the whole effect is not ruined later on, which it could have been when you see the creature in long shots. That they do them really well. The only slight shame is that we don't actually get to see anybody devoured by this thing. It's just sort of inferred that people are getting killed by it off screen, but I guess if there was no easy way of doing that, it was maybe best not to attempt it. So we'll have to wait a little bit longer to see somebody devoured by a giant Christmas pudding, maybe in a remake one day. So now for my negatives, and if I end up spending just as much time on this section as I did with the positives, that doesn't mean that I'm on the whole neutral about the film. I'm just sort of playing devil's advocate, pointing out some things that I noticed. Not all of them are huge things. So firstly, there's not much diversity in this film. It feels like every character is a white male between the age of 35 and 55. That wouldn't bother me normally, but for the fact that I only watched this a couple of nights ago and I already can hardly remember any character and their function other than Quatermass. They all just sort of blend into each other. Just throw a couple of women in there, or people who are very, very distinct from each other. I had the same sort of observation about my previous Hammer review, X the Unknown. I guess that's just the way that they cast movies back then. There is one guy who really stands out, and I'm guessing he's meant to be like the comic relief. He's like a reporter who gets involved in the story for a few scenes at least, and then he gets shot. And the way he dies is really funny. He sort of gets hit by gunfire behind a bar, and just as he's going down, he sort of grabs onto the bar for one last look at the camera. But the way he did that, it tickled me quite a bit. I'll also say that the mind-controlled humans are very bad shots in this film. I mean, Quatermass, if we go by the actor's age, he's like 57, 58, and it shows. I mean, he cannot run very fast in this film at all. I am guessing that this was one of Brian Donlevy's last films as a leading man, surely. He's just really slow. It beggars belief that he could escape an oil refinery with a bunch of much younger people chasing him, and they have machine guns as well. None of them can hit him. I mean, not a single bullet even grazes him. He gets into a car at least once to escape, and it's not even a small car. It's like a big thing that sort of reminds me of a hearse, and nobody can hit this car with a machine gun. You don't even get any close-up shots of bullets sort of hitting the unimportant parts of the car or anything like that. Just all the attempts to shoot in the car, even from 20 yards away, all miss. Later on, there's like a mob that storms the alien base, and some of these humans do get cut down by the gunfire, and I was relieved when this happens. I was like, thank God, that has restored a little bit of credibility to this particular aspect of the script. And I guess for my final complaint, there is a bit of a deus ex machina at the end, because the natural way for this film to finish would have been for the oil refinery base thing to go up in smoke, be set on fire, be blown up. I mean, because the creatures are black, I think that's meant to mean that they're just covered in oil from being trapped in the vat things that they're based in. Though I'm not entirely sure on that, but yeah, just blow the place up or set it on fire. Maybe they didn't have the confidence that they could depict something like that with their 1958 film technology. What they've done instead is have Quatermass send a rocket into space from his own base somewhere else, which doesn't have a pilot in it, and then it crashes into the meteorite which has been sending down these little objects in the first place, and that just ends the whole affair. As soon as the meteorite is taken out, the aliens die down on Earth, and all the mind-controlled humans are cured. It's a little bit of BS at the end of an otherwise very good movie, although apparently in the TV version of Quatermass 2, there's an even more far-fetched ending where Quatermass goes up in a rocket ship himself and plays the hero, taking out the meteorite in space. I shudder to think what that was like. Normally at this point of the review, I would show you what version of the film that I own, but I don't actually own this. When I realised a few weeks ago that this was free to watch on Amazon Prime, I thought to myself, you know what, I'll save myself a little bit of money for this one. I'll just watch it on Prime. I sort of regret that now because it was such a good movie. I wish I'd bought it, and at some point I reckon I probably will. It's not an expensive purchase. It's like £6 on eBay for a DVD copy. I don't think there are any more expensive releases available for this, nothing on Blu-ray, etc. I will say that watching it on Prime, it wasn't the best presentation. A lot of the film is very sharp, but there are some points of it, especially at the start and later on during some of the action sequences, where the screen went a little bit fuzzy. The resolution just kind of went out a little bit. I don't know if that's exclusive to the Amazon version or whether it's on the DVD as well. But for the most part, I wasn't thinking about any of that. I was just enjoying the movie. So let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give this. One, two, three, 4 bloody axes out of 5. That is an excellent score. That exactly matches the score I gave for the first Quatermass film. So I am now 2 films into this trilogy. There is one more film which apparently came out about 10 years after the second one. Brian Donlevy is not in the third one, so I'm wondering what will that one be like. If that turns out to be as good as the first 2, then this is one hell of a sci-fi trilogy. I will keep my fingers crossed. Until next time, cheerio.